your syllabus handy so that you can follow along with the terminology and or have a set of bones from the lower extremity handy so that you can follow along with viewing this videotape also. And the portions or the landmarks on the individual bones that I will be pointing out are those that are listed in the objective sheet on skeletal anatomy, and those that you should be familiar with in preparation for lab practical exam over this material. So, the lower extremity. So, lower extremity is going to consist of the following bones. They'll consist of a femur, the largest bone of the entire skeleton, obviously, within the thigh, the patella, kneecap, down here in the calf, two bones, the larger of the two being the tibia, or shin, that is located on the medial side, and then the smaller, more laterally placed fibula. Okay, so the tibia medially and the fibula laterally. Then when you get down into the foot, the bones of the ankles are collectively called the tarsals, not to be confused with the carpals back in the wrist. In the foot itself, we've got metatarsals, and then down in the toes, phalanges. So with that in mind, let's consider each individual one and its landmarks. So I'll be pointing to some of the individual bones, starting off here with the femur. Now, first of all, to define our directions. The large rounded head of the femur always faces medially, because it's going to be this head that will fit into the acetabulum of the coxal bone to form the hip joint. So this will always be facing medially. Also, this is always the proximal end, as opposed to the distal end of the bone. And if this is medial and this is proximal, then obviously this is going to be lateral. And as far as figuring out the front side versus the back, the anterior and so forth, if you turn it sideways, maybe perhaps if I do it this way, so that you are looking at the head. So the head is facing towards you, then you'll notice that it's bowed somewhat. It's always bowed outwards toward an anterior direction. So this is going to be the anterior surface of this femur. So now you're looking at the anterior surface of the femur. And we'll go through the individual parts. First of all, again, the large rounded head. And then we've got a neck. Then two rather large bumps. This one extending out laterally, which can be felt sticking out of the side of your hip as the greater trochanter. So all this is the greater trochanter. And then a smaller one that is visible more posteriorly is the lesser trochanter. So here at the proximal end, the landmarks are the head, the neck, the greater trochanter, and the lesser trochanter. Now, we'll go down the diaphysis, go down to the distal end of the femur. Again, you're looking at the anterior surface. On the lateral side, this rather mild projection that is sticking out that I'm running my fingers across would be the lateral epicondyle, as opposed to a similar medial epicondyle on the medial side. Now see, when you were using terms differentiating medial from lateral, it is very important that you define the medial versus the lateral side of this bone. The head is your important landmark to do that, since that's always going to be facing medially. You've got two rather large, smooth surfaces that cover the distal end, which are going to be the two articulation points of where this femur articulates with the tibia to form your knee joint. These two smooth surfaces extend all the way anteriorly, inferiorly, and even extending up somewhat on the posterior side are condyles. And to differentiate medial versus lateral, again, look at the head. That's facing medially. So therefore, this one would be medial condyle, and this one, of course, then would be the lateral condyle. Again, looking at that from the anterior view, when we turn it over, now medial and lateral is on the other side. Medial is still the side that the head is projecting towards. So this would be the lateral condyle and the medial condyle. So reviewing the structures that we have here on this tibia down here at the distal end, we've got lateral and medial condyles that wrap all the way around posteriorly. We've got lateral epicondyle and medial epicondyle. Now, the patella, not much to that. There there it is when you're looking at it individually. And there are several of these individual patellas that are floating around within the collection of bones within the box. Going down into the lower leg, the larger of the two bones is the tibia, whose anterior surface is very, very superficial. You can feel the entire anterior surface right underneath your skin. The larger epiphysis is the proximal end, as opposed to the smaller epiphysis being the distal end. So you define the proximal end versus the distal end. This projection that is extending out here, that I'm running my finger over, projects anteriorly. So this will define the anterior side. And then if you look at the distal end, you find one projection extending down more inferiorly on one side as opposed to the other. Where it extends down this side, and that is the medial side of this bone. So this is going to be the medial side. Now, as far as dealing with some of the individual landmarks, we start off here with the proximal end. We've got two smooth surfaces at the proximal end. These are condyles. Again, like the condyles at the distal end of the femur, we've got condyles here at the proximal end of this tibia. There will be these condyles here that will be articulating with the condyles of the femur. Individually, they would be medial condyle. And I'm defining this as the medial one because I know that this is the medial side of this tibia, as opposed to the lateral condyle. Then anteriorly, this projection that extends out is the tibial tuberosity. The tibial tuberosity. If we go to the distal end of the bone, then this large projection that is extending inferiorly, creating a rather large bump here on the medial side, is the medial malleolus. This medial malleolus forms that medial bony projection that you can feel as your ankle on the medial side. So the medial malleolus. Then the second bone of the lower leg is the fibula. So here's an individual fibula. And defining the proximal and the distal ends of this is a little trickier. Because when you look at the two ends, they look so similar to each other. To figure out which end is which is somewhat of a challenge. But in doing so, we find that that end that projects inferiorly, more as a point, is going to be the distal end. So we define this as the distal end. So if we go back to the proximal end, the enlarged end here, which I'm holding the entire fibula by, is simply the head of the fibula. This can be palpated laterally to the knee, just below the knee a little bit. If we go down here to the distal end, then this projection that is sticking out here is on the lateral side. And it is called the lateral malleolus. This lateral malleolus forms that lateral bony projection as your ankle. If we put a tibia and a fibula together, then the large rounded bony projection here of your ankle is medial malleolus. Here it is lateral malleolus. Medial malleolus is tibia. Lateral malleolus is fibula. Both these points can be felt within your ankle. When one breaks your ankle, you're breaking either the medial or the lateral malleolus, or possibly even both of them.